Now, it is that time on The Breakfast Show when I have a special guest joining me. And today I'm delighted to say he's with me here in the studio. He's a web designer by trade, but a part-time local historian. And that is what is relevant because he's so passionate about the history of Stoke Newington. He's even been a local history advisor on the BBC's Antiques Roadshow. He has explored the changing face of retail on Stoke Newington Church Street, tracking the history of more than 100 shops, no less, dating back to the 1840s. He's even just published a little book about it. And I'm pleased to say that Amir Dotan is here with me. Morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I want to ask, where does your love of history come from? Is it something that you loved as a child?
Yeah, so I think from a very young age, if you ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said archaeologist, historian, and probably something more arty. So career-wise, it went more in kind of graphic design, but history and archaeology were always my passion.
Okay. So let's turn to Stoke Newington then, because you settled there more than 20 years ago. And why Stoke Newington?
It was almost an accident. I used to live as an overseas student in Barnet for the first few months, and then someone said, oh, there's a place in Stoke Newington. And I looked on the tube map, and the first question is, where is that? Because you kind of think, if it's not on the tube, it doesn't exist. But I fell in love with it and stayed there ever since.
Yeah, and often these things do happen, as you say, either by chance or by accident. So how did uncovering the history of every shop in Stoke Newington Church Street even come about?
Well, it's interesting because I think over the years I would get emails from new businesses that moved to the area and say, "Ooh, do you know what this shop used to be? We might want to put something on the wall." So I would always go and investigate each shop individually until I thought, you know what, I'll just do it once for all the shops. And that was in 2017. And it just became a great resource for local businesses, a lot of people that research their family history. They sometimes know that their granddad had a shop somewhere in Church Street and they only have the name. So rather than having to go through all the old directories, they just go to my site. There's a lovely kind of spreadsheet. Now there's a book. Yeah. So it's been proving so useful to so many people.
So it's a bit like Who Do You Think You Are, but for shops.
Exactly that. I mean, you can see how some shops have changed so many times from, tobacconists to bootmakers to confectioners, sometimes only once or twice. But there's so much social history, family history, and really kind of seeing how the area has evolved and changed over the decades.
So how long did it take to do this? Because I can't imagine that's an easy feat.
Yeah, no, it was. I enjoyed it. I mean, I took 24 old directories from the archives, and then you kind of pick
as you do
on a weekend, of course, and then you kind of pick one street. And I think it took about an hour just to type each of those directories for that one street into kind of a spreadsheet. So overall, probably, 20 hours, and then you kind of start tweaking it a bit. But for me, I really enjoyed it because every time you add the next kind of 5 years, it's a story being kind of sort of unfolded. So you kind of almost wait to see what happened to that shop. So I know that the son took over from the dad, and then the mom took over from the son, and then all of a sudden it becomes a hairdresser or a takeaway. Yeah. So for me, imagine you have 120 those little stories, and every time you take, 1925, 1937, and you start kind of seeing how some of them disappear, some of them continue for decades. And you see those trends today. You've got businesses that have been around for 50, 60 years. You've got the ones that open and the next summer they're gone. Yeah. So a lot of stories.
And as you say, that social history, and I mentioned, dating back to the 1840s and 1860s, when you were doing this research, was there a sort of a particular time in history where, perhaps there were many shops of a certain type, and then a sort of moment where the sort of changing face of retail happened? Can you pinpoint that?
Yes, I think you can see that every generation had a lot of many things. So today, Church Street is kind of known for 10 estate agents, which is 8%. So people sometimes mention that. But in the 1930s, there were 15 confectioners. 15. And you start thinking, what happened to them? Did people start realizing that having that many sweets is not good for you? But then you also had a lot of tobacconists, stationers, and they all collapsed and converged into just an off-license that has a shelf for each of those things. I think you also see the transition and what happened during the World Wars. So greengrocers and grocers were always in demand, of course, but you can see the dip during the World Wars, and then kind of it rises again and then dips again. But then after the war, you can see that there was a real change. And I think from a very respectable middle class area, it became a bit more industrial, a lot of repair shops, a lot of secondhand shops from maybe some of the houses that were bombed and were left empty. So you start seeing that the street changed towards that. And I think by the 80s, a lot of those old workshops and even small factories that were on the street used to have gown making and handbag manufacturing on the street, a lot of sewing machine repair shops. They made way, and then restaurants.
So almost
opened.
street trade in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. And people sometimes see the photos now of what they know to be a very trendy opticians or a restaurant or a cafe, and it was a little workshop, or it was a draper, or a place where you go and get your radio repaired. So very, very different landscape.
And in your sort of journey of research of shops sort of changing trade, if you like, was there a really surprising one that you kind of go, gosh, I never even knew something like that existed?
I think there's definitely some shops and business types that you have to look on Wikipedia to see what they are. I mean, we had a cutler, and I didn't. What's a cutler, right? And you think there was a shop
tell me.
just for cutlery, you know?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and we used to have a saddler where you get your saddle. Right. So all these little
because they were trades and crafts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a lot of everything was manufactured locally. We used to have umbrella makers on the street and watchmakers and
could do with one of those today.
Exactly. And today, I think you would even imagine that you can just pop down the road and just get a saddle. Or, you know, there was a blacksmith. So I think some of those professions are long gone and we don't even know what they were at the time. So there's a bit of research into that as well. But again, you can also see that, for example, hairdressers and grocers, always in demand. They never go away. Chemists as well. So there's the sort of continuity, beer shops, but then all those other things like tobacconists were very popular. But you can imagine that kind of disappeared.
It must be fascinating that you have so much knowledge at your fingertips. You must be quite a known figure in the area.
Well, I think the local history kind of industry in the area is very small. You know, you can pretty much sort of count us on one finger. So I think once you start running events and you post things on social media and you have a very active Twitter, Instagram account, and you give presentations and talks in local events, you kind of make a name for yourself.
Do people sort of come up to you and sort of go, oh, I've got a little bit of history for you, or I want you to look into this?
All the time. I get about, I think, 2-3 emails a week.
Really?
And messages, which is great because half of them are either people asking me questions and then it gives me a chance to go down a rabbit hole. So do you know my house used to front this and that? What's the history of that wall? Or the other types of emails are just people saying, you know, this is an old photo of my dad outside the shop in the 40s. Yeah. And that's gold dust because it's really interesting to see those photos.
So that brings me to my next question, because do you ever think, okay, Stoke Newington, tick, I've done that. There's another part of London I want to get my teeth into. Oh, you're shaking your head.
No, I'm very particular, and I mean, this is kind of my patch. This is the area that I walk every day when I drop my kids at school, when I come back, when I meet people. So there's still a lot to uncover. And I think for me, it helps me to know that there's a very clear line that I can focus on. But maybe when I retire, I kind of realize that maybe I should start venturing further away towards Clapton or Stamford Hill. You never know.
Okay. I mean, as I say, it's really fascinating. And the knowledge you have at your fingertips. And as you say, it starts making you wonder about where you live and perhaps sort of, you know, going back and delving into archives. You've certainly got me thinking, and I hope you've got London thinking. Now, before I leave you, I ask the same 3 questions of all my Friday special guests. Okay. So, Amir, if you will indulge me. Question 1, this will be interesting. Who would play you in the movie of your life if you could choose the actor?
Oh, wow. Keanu Reeves?
Oh, you didn't even hesitate.
No, I think I'll go for Keanu, yeah.
I know what you mean. The thinking is a thinking type.
I think, I'll go for him.
Question 2, what's the one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
You can accomplish more than you think. I never thought I could actually move to London and kind of make it and kind of survive. And I think I did. So that's what I would say. You know, even if you don't think you can do it, just go for it and you'll surprise yourself.
That's a good one. You can accomplish more than you think. I think we should have that on a T-shirt. And finally, question 3, and this is a particularly good one, I think, for a local historian. If you could choose one building in London, anywhere in London, to have all to yourself for a day, which one would it be and why?
Well, because it is about local history, then I would have to say Clissold House. It's the old mansion in our local park with a great view of what used to be the New River. So if I could spend there a day, I think, that would be my choice.
Clissold Park, yeah. That's a good choice. Yeah, I mean, you didn't even hesitate on any of those questions.
I'll try next time.
No, it's good. Everything from Keanu Reeves to Clissold Park. Amir, before you go, we are talking today about the Euros, of course, which are kicking off quite literally this evening.
Yeah.
What's your sort of take? Is Stoke Newington a big footy?
Yeah. So we're kind of it's a very Arsenal Tottenham area. Obviously, we're very close to Highbury and so on. But I'm actually a Liverpool fan, so I'm probably going to disappoint a few of the local listeners.
It's the way you say it quite apologetically.
Yeah, I think people, that's the one local thing that I didn't attach myself to. Right. But yeah, I'm definitely going to keep my eyes open and really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So if you were I don't know if you are part of a sweepstake, but if you were part of a sweepstake, who would you hope to get in the sweepstake? Which country? It's not a trick question.
I'm an optimist. I would actually say England.
Yay!
Yes,
well, I can tell
definitely.
you.
No, I from 2002 when I first arrived, I've kind of been on the ups and downs with everyone. You get really absorbed into it. So I would say England. It's time.
Well, on that note, I know that my colleague, fellow presenter Shaykor Gurval, in the BBC London sweepstake, she got England.
Oh,
I got
great.
Turkey. So
well, you never know. You never know.
Your facial expression says it all.
Yeah.
But they're very proud of their football. So I didn't have a choice. But anyway, listen, absolutely lovely to speak to you and just find out a little bit more about where that passion for Stoke Newington and the history of it and the changing face of all those 100 plus shops comes from, dating back to the 1840s. And if you came into that halfway through, you can listen back to my chat with Amir on BBC Sounds, and that will be available just after 10 o'clock. It is 8:50.